It's time for the Daily Stand Up Podcast presented by Agile Dad with your host, Lee Henson. Without any further ado, let's get started. It's time again for us to have a discussion regarding the types of Agile metrics and Scrum metrics that should be tracked. I have had this discussion a number of times with different individuals and companies, and it's interesting because there's a thread that I found, a common thread, and I'm going to reveal that thread to you. And this thread should help you overcome, the thought behind what types of things you should be tracking versus what types of things really don't matter, or which types of things really have a negative impact in the opposite direction. So, the first thing that I want to make sure we talk about is the concept of tracking time. Now, while, companies for centuries, ever since the beginning of work, have kept track of how long someone has been in the workplace for, to make sure people were there for the time that they said they were going to be there, and I think we kind of have grown beyond that metric, right? We've gotten into an environment where we trust that when we hire people, that these people are going to be available and that they are going to be present for the time allotment that they say they're going to be there. In fact, many organizations have what's called core hours, and then they have flexible hours around them. So I think the concept of tracking time, even on contracts where you're billing time and materials, this is going to be interesting. I don't know that your time clock punch in, punch out is what the people are asking for when they're paying for time and materials. They just want to know that you put in your honest, best effort to do the things that you did within the allotted amount of time. They're not asking for you to go out of your way to keep track of each moment in time, and that the expectation is not that you'll have an accounting for each 15 seconds that a person is available and what they were doing on the clock. I believe that what people are looking for is just that the honest amount that they paid is being spent in a judicious way to build a product or service that they're trying to build. So, with that being said, I thought we would talk about some non time based elements that come into play. So, I'm going to identify two or three things that you should be looking for and two or three things that you should not be looking for. So, right out of the gate, one of the things that I like to talk about is something called a cumulative flow diagram. Now, this is more of a Kanban type thing, but it is a really advanced analytic chart. So it gives you a visualization of cycle time, throughput, work in progress. It lets you see where things are. It's just a really good way for you to see how things are progressing. Now, many people use this with days and work hours, but instead I use it with days and story points. And what this does is it just allows you to see how things are flowing, right? And it allows you to be able to track in such a way that you can see that work is being completed. So that way you can see where expectations are. You can even keep track of different flows and say, how long did something remain in progress, or how long did we take doing follow up, whatever the case may be. So there's ways for you to track things without using time, just by saying, hey, this stayed in queue for this many days, which I guess technically people could argue is time, but you're not sitting here micromanaging at the hours level, which I think is so important. And my rule is if there ever was a time that you were going to use time, if you used it in a flow sequence like this, that would be the only time that I would say, hey, it may be reasonable for you to use time to track things across sprints. So here's one example where, probably my only example, where time is going to matter, right? The second reporting metric that I think actually matters is burnup. Now, burnup is where you can show that the cone of uncertainty is diminishing and that you're actually burning through the amount of work as prescribed and that you're getting things done, right? So it's the exact opposite of burn down. It shows the accumulation of work that's being completed, and it shows it using story points, which I think is incredibly important. Because here again, I don't want to necessarily use burn down. So that's one of the ones that I don't use. And that's because burn down tends to force us to think at a team and individual level of hours remaining, hours worked, hours. In a second you start doing things in hours, it really inhibits your ability to give solid estimates and a forecast. It takes away your ability to remove time from the picture and forces you to start thinking of metrics and things strictly using time. So, my best advice is burn up, yes, burn down, no. Right. So, if you're going to track things and you want to learn more about burn up charts, you can look online. There's several examples of burn up charts. But what I can tell you is burn up's going to provide you with a much, much better visual of what's happening within the organization and what's happening across teams so that you can see where things are getting stuck and see how things are flowing. The third one that I wanted to make sure we cover, and this is my third yes, you should do, is something called Agile Earned Value. Now, I hear a lot of people who diss Waterfall all the time and say, Waterfall didn't bring anything positive to the table. Well, I got news for you. Earned value reporting is something that came from Waterfall. And basically, it says if I'm looking at a long term release or a long term project, based on how far we progressed into the project and the amount of money we've spent, did I get that percentage of points done as well? So that way I could say, we're 50% of the way through the project. We burned through 70% of the budget. And we've got 40% of the points done. I have a problem with that, right? So this allows you to see an agile earned value diagram where it outlines for you and shows you, are you on track? Are you ahead of schedule? So this in a way kind of replaces a burn down chart because it doesn't use hours, but it shows you the actual work being done and it shows you how that work should flow. So far we said cumulative flow diagram, yes. Burn up charts, yes. Agile earned value, absolutely yes. That's my favorite. We said burn down charts using time, probably not, no. And we said tracking things at individual and time based tracking of any kind, probably not, right? So you don't want to track anything at an individual level. You don't even want to track time at, you know, uh, a team level either. So anything time tracking or anything individual tracking, my answer is going to be no. The last thing that I will say that you should track is you want to make sure that you track your debt. Now, by debt, I don't just mean defects. You want to have a nice debt backlog or a debt log that shows all the things that are outstanding debt. And you want to be able to look against it and say, are we getting rid of debt? Are we shedding debt? Are we accumulating debt? And I think that sometimes we don't bother to keep track of debt. And that's something very important we need to look at. Because if we see debt continuing to accrue, that's a sign that we need to stop and have a technical debt sprint. Now, many people, something you should shy away from, here we go. Many teams and organizations will say, I'm just going to take Frederick and put him on debt for 10% of his time during a sprint or 20% of his time during a sprint. And I tell people that's like paying the minimum monthly payment on a credit card. You're never going to eliminate the debt if you approach it that way. So, one of the most important things you can do when you're tracking debt is to set aside an entire sprint and say, for this sprint, we are going to address technical debt. And by doing so, what's going to happen is everyone's going to focus on the debt. We'll identify the top 10 items that are debt related and we'll eliminate as many of them as we can. This way, you got people dedicating 100% of their attention to getting rid of that debt, and the odds of you successfully getting to a place that's better than you were before increase dramatically, astronomically even. So, there you have it. So, I hope that this information was useful to you, and I hope it helps you get your head around which reporting metrics make sense. Until next time, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Whatever you do, do take care.